So in this video we're going to be looking at what I'm calling plots, part 2. So we're going to continue from the first part. We're even going to use some of the data from the first video where I introduced the most basic plotting you can do in Matplotlib. But now we're going to move on to some things that are a little bit more complicated. So first off, what if you want to put two different axes on the same canvas? And in fact, let me even show you what I mean there. So let's say you have a figure and you have 4 different plots entirely. And you want them all on the same figure, but each plot individual. So you're not overlaying things like you would in this picture up here. Instead, you want 4 of these. Okay, well, let's make a figure. And we're going to now assign axes. So instead of doing fig, where was it? Instead of doing plt.figure to initialize a figure, we're going to explicitly assign the figure to fig2. And the axes of this figure are going to be assigned to this axes value. So this is going to be done with a subplot. So plt.subplots command. And we'll give it n rows equals 2. So 2 different rows. And we'll say n cols equals 2. So 2 different columns. And we can still say our fig size is equal to, I think 6 by 6 looked good. Okay, so what are we going to do with this? Well, if I just plot this as is, this is what it looks like. We have 4 different axes on which to put data. Now in our case, let's go super simple. Let's just plot this stuff from above. Let's just plot this without the error bars, but onto each of these different axes. So we're going to do axes 0 to grab the upper left, I think. And we're going to, in fact, we'll do 0, 0 to ensure we grab the upper left. So we're going to grab the 0 row and the 0 column. We're going to plot x data, y data, and let's go ahead and make this one a circle. And then axes in 0, 1, so 0 row first column, we're going to plot. Let's just do the exact same data, but with a different style. This can be a red X. And then axes in the 1, 0 location. Let's plot this as maybe a blue circle. And axes in the 1, 1, the last location we have left in this set of axes. We're going to plot x data as a green star. And now let's look what happens. Now we get, oh, looks like we have a little error. Now we get 4 different plots, but all on the same canvas. So this is all the same figure. So how useful is this? Extremely useful, and it's going to be a great tool to know. Now at its most simple version, what I've done here, it may not be, you may not use it all the time, but what if we say number of columns is 1, number of rows is 2. Now we can plot them on top of each other. And we're going to go ahead and do that. I think it was the wrong, yeah, when you only have 1 column, you don't need to explicitly say what column you're in. And here we go. Now we can stack things on top of each other. And I'll show you an awesome example where this is really useful in a little while. All right. Now let's say we wanted to do something a bit more complex. If you remembered in the first video, we imported gridspec. What if we wanted 2 up here and 1 down below? Well, we can use gridspec to define a custom grid and say where things go. So as an example, let's go ahead and we'll create a figure this time. plt.figure. And we're going to say, we're going to name this figure 1. And we'll say our fig size is equal to 14 by 8. So we're going to make this a chunky figure. Now we're going to define a grid spec that we'll call GS. And this will be a grid spec of 6 by 4. So essentially this is going to be the grid we're going to build our figures on top of. Okay. Now for our grid spec, we're going to update it. I don't like a bunch of white space. I think white space can look kind of ugly in between these things. And I'll show you this on and off with the figure we're about to create. So I'm just going to update it so that the width and the height are a little lower than they are by default. So that'll reduce the white space you see between these axes. Okay, now here we go. We're going to go ahead and say axis1 is equal to fig.add subplot. You'll notice there's sort of a theme here. We're adding subplots to work with. And this subplot is going to be grid spec'd at 0 to 4 and 0 to 3. Now you'll see what that means in just a second. And let me go ahead and get a little lazy and do axis 2, 0 to 4 and 3 to 4, and axis 3 as 4 to 6 and 0 to 4. Now I have a sheet I'm copying to get the code right. You wouldn't know this a priori. You'd sort of have to play around, and we'll see that right here. So let's go ahead and plot these. So axis1.plot, we'll do x data, y data. And let's go ahead and say it's a black circle this time with a marker face color that's golden. MFC marker face color of gold. Okay, and for this we'll go ahead and grab the x-axis. So you'll notice when you're working with subplots, things change. You get axes, you set axes. It's the sort of object-oriented paradigm. Whereas when you're working with just, plt.plot, you do plt.xlabel, .ylabel, and that's because you only have one axis to work on, so you don't need to specifically get and set things for each specific axis. Let's go ahead and get the x-axis, and let's just say set visible as false. And again, we'll turn all of these commands off and on, but I want to make it look good for you guys up front. And in fact, to save some time, let's just get those next two axes in here as well. So we're going to have axis 2, same data, but this time red S squares, and they'll be silver. And then axis 3 is going to be gold stars with white face color. And it looks like it might be a little bigger marker size. So let's go ahead and run this. So first we're going to make our figure. We're going to grid spec it out. So this will tell us where to put the subplots. We'll plot everything. And then finally we'll show it on line 87. Let's zoom in there just a little bit. Okay, so let's run that. And this is what we get, this fancy grid specking. So in my case, how the grid specking was chosen was to make the upper left the largest, 0 to 4, 0 to 3. So that means spanning from row 0 to row 4, 0 to 4. Just like this spans from row 0 to 4. This case from column 0 to 3. This one spans column 3 to 4. Then this guy down here spans rows 4 to 6 in columns 0 to 4. So I played around with that, and we could update that how we wanted. But let's turn off the white spacing and see what that does. So slightly bigger gaps. Maybe not quite as nice. And you can customize this for whatever's appropriate for your specific figure. And then the other part was the set visible equals false. Let's turn those off. And now we see we have these extra axes. But if these axes are shared, we don't want to necessarily display that here. And if these are going to be covered up, and if the x values don't matter, we don't want to display those down there. So you can sort of get this final product here. It's fine and pretty. Not perfect, hasn't been worked on too much, but it's a good example of how grid spec works.